All right. Hello. Welcome back to another Trek Talk live stream. This week, going to be taking a look at the original series episode, Errand of Mercy. And also, before I go any further, please, if you would, please like the stream. And if you would, sub to the channel also, if you haven't. Hello, Lord Thoth. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for being here. Okay. Yeah, so been a little while. I guess my last Trek Talk was the Tuesday before Halloween, I think, probably. So been over a month. And I got, I think, just a couple of episodes left here in the first season. And Lothar says, great episode. Yeah, it is an excellent one. Definitely. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and get into this here. And hello, Jay Rocker. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for being here. All right. Okay, so as the Return of the Archons was filming, NBC had yet to inform Star Trek whether any additional shows were going to be needed beyond the 26 they had been contracted for up to that point. Now, Robert Justman had been sweating out the wait. It was his job to make sure that the scripts had gone through their breakdown and all aspects of the production were properly prepared. Now, weeks earlier, on November 13th of, I believe this would be 66, NBC had coughed up 14,000 and authorized the writing of 4 additional scripts just in case. And Lothar says, even the bad episodes from classic Trek are great episodes. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, even the not so great ones, I think we're all fond of, just like we're fond of some bad movies from those days as well. And certainly better than anything you're going to get today. Now, on December 8th, with Archons in the midst of filming, Justman sent a memo to Gene Kuhn. As you are aware, there is a definite likelihood of our being picked up by the network for 4 more shows this season. One of the conditions, or the main condition of this pickup, is that we will be able to keep delivering new shows to the network without interruption through the 27th of April, 1967. As of now, we have Space Seed, which will follow the presently in production show, and then the likelihood that we can get a taste of Armageddon sufficiently down to budget in order to enable us to follow Space Seed. After that, we have nothing. As had happened in October of 66, when the mid-season pickup from NBC came and Roddenberry, Kuhn, and Justman, with just a few days' notice, had to be ready to put Shore Leave into production on the very day after the Menagerie finished filming, they now had to be ready with something or anything to put before the camera should the network want it. With the script development money assured by NBC, Kuhn had been writing scripts of his own as well as rewriting those of others, scripts that he knew might never see the light of day. He delivered a pruned down version of A Taste of Armageddon to Justman in time to follow on the heels of Space Seed. And then, in sufficient time, he delivered his polish of DC Fontana's script for This Side of Paradise, as well as his own script for The Devil in the Dark. And this brought Star Trek to a total of 26 episodes. Beyond this, Kuhn had other scripts waiting in the wings. Justman had been correct with his prediction that NBC would want 4 more shows. The network would scale this order back from 4 additional episodes to 3, but on December 9th, Kuhn needed to get 4 more teleplays ready to go before cameras. He was still struggling to get a script for The City on the Edge of Forever that could actually be filmed, close to budget, and then dashed off a new one of his own that was written in record time. And that was Errand of Mercy. And as usual, I am reading from Mark Cushman's book, These Are the Voyages, for behind the scenes information on this episode. So this episode was written by Gene Kuhn and directed by John Newland. From TV Guide, March 18th, 1967. A peace-loving race gives Captain Kirk a lesson in warfare. The inhabitants of the neutral planet Organia hesitate to interfere in a war between Kirk's Federation and an invader until intervention becomes necessary. Commander Kor, representing the Klingon Empire, wants Organia as a base. Kirk, representing the Earth-led United Federation of Planets, has the same desire. The Organians and their leader, Aelborn, have a surprising idea of their own. The theme and hook is a battle between the United States and the Communist Allies, or between hawks and doves, circa 1967, with divine intervention on a distant alien world. Lifting a page from Jonathan Swift, Star Trek once again snuck a hot political debate onto primetime television by disguising the intent, changing the names, and shifting the time period. Substitute Organia for the divided nation of Vietnam, the Federation for the US, and the Klingon Empire for China and its allies, and you can see Gene Kuhn's agenda for this topical material. The problems are slight. There are a few questionable performances by minor characters and a few awkwardly staged sequences, but nothing out of the norm for a 1960s one-hour TV show shot in 6 days. We are again asked to accept the troublesome tendency of science fiction of this era to present stories on other worlds where everyone, including the natives, can speak English, even when not in the presence of those who would normally communicate in that language. And let's face it, that still happens today. For the benefit of the story, Kirk is portrayed as overly macho and too quick to jump into a shoving match with the Klingons. Normally, the captain is a cooler head than this. While not a perfect episode, there are many special moments. The Klingons are, of course, introduced here. Kor, portrayed by John Colicos, is a treasure. Kuhn did well in creating a worthy adversary for Kirk, as Paul Schneider had with the Romulan commander in Balance of Terror. Kor is not a one-dimensional character. His reaction to the news that he has the captain of the Enterprise as a prisoner is delightful. It is clear Kor truly admires Kirk and craves his admiration in return. Beyond this, he is sad knowing that he must have Kirk executed in such an inglorious manner. He also laments having to order the killing of thousands of Organians. Of this, Kuhn wrote, "The Klingon commander is sitting at his desk, hands over his face. He is, at this moment, an unhappy man. The fact is, he does not relish butchering unarmed civilians. He is a soldier, and a good one. Also effective, the eeriness, enhanced by the score whenever members of the arrested civilization do something unexpected and profound, such as when Trefane instinctively knows that there are spaceships taking orbit around the planet, or that hundreds of armed men have appeared outside the gates of the city. Also, the clever surprise ending that no one has died and the Organians are not as they appear. The best is saved for last. Kirk's realization that he's being a horse's ass, catching himself making the very same argument as his enemy. Errand of Mercy is a very worthwhile trek, even with a few bumps in the road." Okay, and by the way, the StreamYards is acting a little twitchy, so I don't know. I hope that this thing won't freeze up or I won't have the stream dropped or something. But let's go ahead and get into this one. Okay, so. All right, so the episode begins with Kirk and the Enterprise receiving word that peace negotiations with the Klingons have faltered, and the Federation anticipates an imminent attack. The Enterprise is to proceed to the planet Organia and take whatever steps are necessary to prevent the Klingons from using it as a base. The Enterprise comes under attack by a Klingon ship. The Enterprise returns fire and destroys it. Kirk then orders the Enterprise to increase speed to arrive at Organia before the Klingons do. Upon arriving at Organia, Kirk tells Sulu that if the Klingons arrive in force, the Enterprise should retreat and not try to fight them alone. Then Kirk and Spock beam down to the planet, finding what appears to be a primitive, largely rural and agrarian society. They are greeted by an elderly man who calls himself Aelborn. Kirk warns him that his world is in great danger, and they meet with the Council of Elders to discuss the matter. Spock, meanwhile, chooses to take some tricorder readings instead while Kirk meets with them. And Lortha says, always twitchy. Yeah, it's, yeah, sometimes. Now, Kirk warns them of the threat that the Klingons pose and that they would find life under Klingon rule very oppressive. Kirk assures them that the Federation will help them build defenses and assist them in resisting the Klingons. But the Organians dismiss the danger that the Klingons pose and assure Kirk that they have no need for assistance. Aelborn suggests that Kirk and the Enterprise are the ones that are in danger and that it would be best if they just left, simply saying that they live a peaceful way of life and the Klingons aren't a threat. Now, Spock arrives and he tells Kirk that his investigations have revealed a society that is completely stagnant and appears to have had no significant progress in over 10,000 years, as far as he can tell. Then Sulu calls and tells Kirk that the Enterprise is under attack by multiple Klingon ships. Kirk orders him to retreat and contact Starfleet for reinforcements. Then one of the elders announces that several men have beamed down and they are heavily armed. Kirk asks how he knows that, but the Organians more or less just kind of brush this question aside and suggest that Kirk and Spock be disguised as Organians in order to keep them safe from harm. And we see it's a group of Klingons who have arrived who occupy this settlement. Now, after switching into their disguises, they discover that the Organians have hidden their phasers and won't return them. They suggest that Spock pose as a trader, a dealer in kivas and trillium. The Klingons arrive, led by Kor, who announces that he is the new military governor of Organia and that the planet is now part of the Klingon Empire. Kor takes an interest in Kirk and Spock. Kirk is posing as an Organian named Barona, who, unlike the Organians, is not welcoming or friendly to them. And in Spock as well, who he suspects may be a spy. R.I.P. John Colicos. Yeah. Kor and also Baltar from Battlestar Galactica, too, and some other stuff. I forget what else I've seen him in, but, he was in other stuff back in those days. I think he was in an episode of Lost in Space as well. Now, Kor tells the Organians that they have numerous rules they will have to follow, and any violation of them will result in death. Aoborn replies that the Organians will comply. Kor says he'll need a liaison to meet with them to discuss matters on Organia when needed, and he chooses Kirk for the job, declaring his distaste for the other Organians who are always smiling and compliant. Smiling, always smiling. Says that he finds Kirk's hostility refreshing. Kor then warns the Organians that any acts of rebellion will be severely punished, with the death of a Klingon being punished with the death of 1,000 Organians. Aoborn assures Kor that they will cause no trouble and only want peace. Spock is taken for questioning while Kor gives Kirk a list of laws that the Organians will have to obey, written in English, conveniently enough. Now, after Spock has been released, he and Kirk plot to attack that night because there's a munitions dump near this fortress that Kor and the other Klingons have taken possession of and are using as a headquarters. And, they have this scene where Kirk and Spock are walking through the town, and of course, they get accosted by some Klingons. And at one point, Kirk starts to make an aggressive move towards a Klingon, and then Spock stops him. And then he openly refers to Kirk as Captain, right in front of all these Klingons. So kind of blowing Kirk's cover. Oh, hey, Adega. Hello, sir. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Always good to see you. Okay, so that night they subdue a Klingon guard and then they detonate the explosives, all the munitions with a grenade. Later, they and they're very proud of themselves after they've done it. Later, they meet with the elders and admit that they caused the explosion. And I mean, I have to say, I mean, Core outright says, you know, if you screw around, we're going to kill people. So Kirk knows what could possibly happen if they do this, you know, but they do it anyway. And then, of course, later he's like appalled that the Klingons are killing prisoners. Like, dude, they told you they were going to do that, you know. So they meet with the elders and they admit that they caused the explosion. The Organians are appalled by these violent acts and they urge Kirk to never do anything like that again. Kirk, who at this point is really getting fed up with the Organians, urges them to start fighting back. Kor arrives, telling Kirk that he'll be arrested and questioned, but Aelborn reveals who Kirk really is. Aelborn apologizes to Kirk, but says that he doesn't want Kirk harmed by an interrogation. At this point, both Kirk and Kor express their contempt for the Organians. Then Kor has Kirk imprisoned, and Kirk arrested and brought to his office. He asks Kirk, hold on, there we go. So he asks Kirk about the deployment of Federation ships, and Kirk refuses to give that information. Kor tells Kirk that if he refuses to answer, he'll use a Klingon mind scanning device, which can cause permanent brain damage and leave Kirk a vegetable. He also threatens to have Spock dissected. He then gives Kirk 12 hours to decide, for some reason, I don't know why he gives them all that time, to decide if he'll cooperate or not. And then he has him imprisoned along with Spock. Now, later that night, Aelborn arrives, somehow getting past the guards, and he frees them, taking them back to the council chamber. Kirk expresses confusion. First, they hand Kirk and Spock over to the Klingons, and then they free them. So Aelborn says that the Klingons intend to harm Kirk and Spock, and they won't permit that to happen. Spock asks what happened to the guards at the prison, but Aelborn simply says that nothing happened to them. In Kor's office, a guard tells Kor that the prisoners are gone and seem to simply disappear after the guards checked on them. Kor demands that the prisoners be returned, and he has 200 Organians executed as punishment. He then warns that another 200 will be executed every 2 hours until the prisoners are returned. Kirk is outraged, but the Organians seem completely unconcerned about the deaths of their people. Kirk demands that the Organians return their phasers. Aelborn refuses at first, but Kirk threatens him, and then he relents. Kirk and Spock leave to plan an attack, and after they leave, the Organians lament that they are determined to commit more violence and wonder if they should intervene and put a stop to it. So Kirk and Spock infiltrate Kor's headquarters after subduing some of the guards. After confronting Kor, he tells them that a Federation fleet is actually on its way, and soon they and the Klingon fleet will meet. So soon the Federation and the Klingons will be at war. Then a group of Klingons arrive, but when they try to attack each other with their weapons, suddenly their weapons give off extreme heat, forcing them to drop them and preventing them from being used. And then the same thing occurs when they try to attack each other hand to hand. Then and the same thing happens on the Enterprise and all the other ships that are in orbit over the planet. The Organians arrive and announce that they are responsible for the strange heat phenomenon. Did I skip that one? Okay, I guess I forgot to add that image. Oh well. And they won't permit any more violence by either the Federation or the Klingons. So Kirk and Kor are both outraged by this, and they insist that the Organians have no right to interfere in how the Federation or Klingon conduct their affairs. Kirk says they should be siding with the Federation. After all, the Klingons have killed hundreds of Organians. But Aelborn assures Kirk that no one has been killed, noting that it's been thousands of years since anyone died on Organia. The Organians then ask Kirk and Spock and the Klingons to leave the planet as their presence is intensely painful for beings like themselves. Kirk then asks what they mean by that, and Aelborn tells them that the Organians were once humanoid like them. But millions of years ago, they evolved beyond the need for bodies, and then they transform into beings of light and they disappear. Kirk and Kor realize that the war that they were anticipating isn't going to happen. And Kor laments that that's a shame. After all, the battle would have been glorious. And then both fleets depart, and it ends there. So, and this, I give this one a B plus. Overall, it's definitely a good episode. It's a little slow, I think, but definitely one of the better episodes. And of course, the thing is, it's one of those stories where all the drama could really be resolved if because there's people who have information and for some reason they just don't give it. It's like if the Organians had just said at the beginning, yeah, by the way, we're like these immortal energy beings and you can't hurt us. And these bodies you see are just projections. I mean, if they just said that, but for some reason they conveniently just keep their mouths shut until the end of the episode. If it weren't for that, I'd give it an A. Okay, so the title of this episode comes courtesy of Charles Dickens. A line from the life and adventures of Nicholas Nickleby that reads, "It is an errand of mercy that brings me here. Pray let me discharge it." The quote applies to the writing of the story and script as much as to its theme. This was the 45th story assignment of the year. More assignments had been given out for Star Trek, and therefore more money spent developing stories than any other series on television at the time. And too many of these treatments, outlines, and teleplays were not working out. It was not ego that prompted Gene Coon to stop rewriting scripts done by others and instead just dash off three of his own: Arena, The Devil in the Dark, and now Errand of Mercy. And man, that's pretty impressive because in a matter of just a few weeks, he wrote all those episodes. And those are all, some of the best episodes in this series. Probably just about anybody could put them in the top 10. Of the assignments given out, the stories and scripts in development, Kuhn had nothing remotely close to being ready to offer Justman. And so on the very day he finished writing Devil in the Dark, Kuhn rolled a fresh sheet of paper into his typewriter, lit another cigarette, and began his third original Star Trek script. And probably popped some amphetamines too, if my understanding is correct. So Stan Robertson at NBC was ecstatic. This was another action adventure story that mostly took place on a planet away from the Enterprise. Beyond this, the story had a message, but was not preachy about it. And production would clearly require both outdoor locations and a sizable cast, so much so that many of the Star Trek stand-ins played their usual crewman roles as well as doubling as villagers or Klingons. Now, notably, Dr. McCoy is absent from this episode, and this is actually the last episode that he does not appear in. He appears in every episode going forward from here. And Scotty is also missing from this episode, too. We see little of the Enterprise itself. We don't even see the transporter room. And counting his pennies, or lack of them, Kuhn wrote the village so that it could match a standing outdoor set that was already pre-existing at Desilu's 40 acres. Many extras were needed and costumes and animals, but the cost-cutting measures already implemented by Kuhn allowed Errand of Mercy to be one of the less costly episodes of the season. Few writers could churn out material as faster as well as Kuhn. Regarding his invention of Star Trek's new villains, Dorothy Fontana revealed, Gene Kuhn came up with the Klingons, though we never really liked the name. We said, Gene, can't you come up with a different name than a Klingon? We hate it. It was odd sounding. There was no time to come up with something different, though, and time since then has proven that it works just fine. Nearly every episode of the original Star Trek took 6 days to prepare, sometimes less. Errand of Mercy took 8. There were many challenges here, including the hiring of a new director. Joseph Pevney was the obvious choice to handle an action piece like Errand of Mercy, but while this episode was in pre-production, Pevney was already directing Devil in the Dark. Gene Kuhn had someone else in mind, someone he felt whose name could bring some celebrity value to Star Trek. John Newland. Did I not? Okay, I guess I neglected to get a screen capture of his name. But he's the one who directed this episode. He started his career as an actor. In 1950, before stepping behind the camera, he served as a regular cast member on One Man's Family, a primetime soap on NBC. 2 years later, Newland received an Emmy nomination as Best Actor for his recurring work on Robert Montgomery Presents. It was there he first tried his hand at directing. He again served double duty as an actor-director on more than a dozen episodes of The Loretta Young Show. In 1959, he began a 3-year stint directing and hosting Alcoa Presents, a dramatic anthology series involving allegedly true stories of the supernatural. Initially named after its original sponsor, the series later became known as One Step Beyond. Oh, hello. Scott Lee Spence. Good to meet you, sir. Thank you for stopping by. My favorite Star Trek episode of any series of all time. Really? Okay. Okay. Because of One Step Beyond, Newland had achieved celebrity status, which brought further prestige to Star Trek. To baby boomers and sci fi enthusiasts, Newland was thought of as the other Rod Serling. One Step Beyond actually beat The Twilight Zone to the airwaves by 1 year, and Serling patterned his on camera introductions after those of Newland. Newland had worked with William Shatner before, giving him direction in The Promise, an episode of One Step Beyond. He said of Shatner, he's a charming actor and a hard-working actor. I thought he was adorable, and he has been an excellent friend of mine. The first chore was casting. Because of the nature of the script and the introduction of the Klingons, this was a longer and more involved process than usual. As makeup artist Fred Phillips later recalled, I had never heard of a Klingon, and nothing in the script that I read told me what it was. Kuhn merely described them as hard-looking Asian types. Fortunately, the actor hired to play the head Klingon had some ideas of his own. Jay Rocker says, yes, rest in peace, John Colicos. He was great in this episode, also in Battlestar Galactica as Baltar. Yes. And Scott Lee Spence says, watching Kirk have his pride and ego shoved back in his face was a hell of a dramatic moment. Yeah, it's a very, telling moment when Kirk, when the Organian kind of calls Kirk out and is like, because they're kind of arguing in it about war, and then the Organian, or rather Kirk says something like, eventually we'll come to a peace settlement or something like that. And the Organian says, yes, you'll eventually find peace, but only after millions have been killed in a war. Is that really what you want? And he's kind of like, well, nobody wants war except me. I want a war. But yeah, it's a very telling moment because your hero kind of gets kind of called out and is shown as being kind of misguided, or being sort of basically not being the one who is really has the moral high ground, and it's something you don't often see. You saw a little of that, say, in Star Trek 6, for example, is another good one. I don't know. The Klingons bring out the worst in Kirk, it seems. Of course, and they haven't even killed his son yet at this point. Spoilers. Uh, where was I? Okay, so John Colicos. So let me bring him up. There you go. John Colicos was recommended by Newland, who had worked with the actor on One Step Beyond and wanted him to play Kor, the Klingon commander. Colicos said, quote, "We devised the makeup right there and then. Fred Phillips said, 'What do you want to look like?' I saw the script as a futuristic Russia and America at loggerheads over this peaceful little planet. So I said, let's go back in the past and think Genghis Khan, because Kor is a military commander ready to take over the universe with his hordes." John Abbott, at 61, played Aelborn, leader of the Organian Council. He had over 100 acting credits in film and television. 1 year before this, he and Roger C. Carmel, who played Harry Mudd, were the prominent guest actors on The Barter, an episode of I Spy. Between that time and this, Abbott also was the featured guest star on The Dream Merchant on Lost in Space. Peter Bracco playing Claymare, Aelborn's right-hand man. I think, yeah, so he's the other, I don't know if, yeah, there you go. There he is. Had over 200 credits in film and TV, which also included a recent episode of Lost in Space. He was the alien leader in the episode The Deadly Games of Gamma 6. Bracco had also worked with Leonard Nimoy in The Outer Limits. Victor London, who played the Klingon lieutenant. Let's see if I can find a good image of him. There he is. He was no stranger to science fiction or to cult TV series of the 60s. He received second billing in the 1964 cult film Robinson Crusoe on Mars, playing Friday, as well as appearances on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and The Time Tunnel. With Errand of Mercy, he was the first Klingon to be seen on Star Trek. London had also been in the running to be the first Vulcan. He said, quote, "I had been called in when they were casting the role of Spock. I understood that it was between me, Leonard Nimoy, and another actor. Uh, Byron Haskin, who had directed Robinson Crusoe on Mars, was working on Star Trek at the time, and he tried to get me cast as Spock, but Gene Roddenberry and Nimoy had known each other since the 50s, and Nimoy got the role." Principal photography began Thursday, January 26, 1967. This was the same week that a fire erupted in the Apollo 1 capsule, resulting in the deaths of 3 astronauts: Virgil Gus Grissom, Edward Higgins White, and Roger Chaffee. Also that week, a treaty banning the use of military weapons in space was signed. Let's see. Now, on day 2 of filming, the company traveled to Culver City and desolate 40 acres for the third time in the series. This time, the Jerusalem City set that was built for the 1927 Cecil B. DeMille movie King of Kings was used as the Organian town square. Can I find a good image of that? Let me see. Let me see if I can find a good. Let me see. Okay. Well, I guess that's probably about the best shot I'm going to get there. I don't have a real long distance shot of it. Okay. This portion of the village, okay, so the part of the village just inside the gate was used before on Star Trek. It was the area of the castle that we see in Rigel 7, on Rigel 7 in the cage. Colicos said of John Newland, he was highly intellectual, a highly educated man. John was always reading a book. He was very professional and wasn't interested in any squabbles. If you didn't know all your lines, he would just say, well, when you're ready, I'll be ready. And he would just sit and read his book. I think John always felt that television was just a notch beneath him. There was no rehearsal time on Star Trek, Newland said. You just went in and did it. But with guys like Shatner, Nimoy, and the rest of the cast, it was easy. Good actors do very good things to begin with, so it's just a question of the director knowing how to put it all together. Newland later said that he enjoyed his single directing assignment on Star Trek and he would like to have returned, but other commitments precluded his involvement. Now, the Citadel, that looming fortress on a mountaintop used by the Klingons as a home base, and I don't think I have an exterior shot of it, but that Citadel you see in the episode is actually a real place. It's a fortress on, was it Haiti? Yeah, it's a real castle called Citadel Le Ferrier in Haiti. Even with the trip to Desilu 40 Acres, all the directors, the livestock, and all the Klingon uniforms and costumes earned a mercy at $175,527 came in under the studio's per episode allowance by $9,473, lowering the season's deficit to $74,507. And they would need every dime of the savings as the city on the edge of forever was just around the corner. So this episode aired on Thursday, March 23rd, 1967. And it came in second in the ratings that night behind Bewitched, as usual. It was always losing to Bewitched in the first half hour. In the second half hour, it was second again, losing out to the Thursday night movie. Let's see. Now, Robert Justman was the one at Star Trek who was given the chore of picking which episodes would repeat. He would give this one a pass, though. It was surprising since this was the only first season episode to feature the Klingons, and it would actually, because of that, be very important and a catalyst for more episodes down the road. Jay Rocker says Martin Landau and DeForest Kelley were also considered to play Spock. Yeah, I knew about Landau. I didn't know DeForest Kelley was actually in a running for Spock, though. But yeah, I've heard that Landau. I heard about that. He would have been certainly been interesting as Spock, and I know I forget his name, um, but it's the guy. It's the guy that plays Stan in Amok Time. You know, the guy that Pring chooses over Spock. That actor was also, I think, in the running, considered as Spock at one point too. I see no logic in preferring Stan over me. Justman said, I had an embarrassment of riches during that first season, and I felt we had episodes more deserving of a second network airing. We never thought that the Klingons were going to catch on the way they did, Dorothy Fontana said, but let's face it, in production terms, Romulans and Vulcans were expensive to do because of the ears. You can hide some of it with headdresses and things like that, but you still had the eyebrows, whereas the Klingons really just had some facial hair and slightly darkened skin, and that was pretty much it. It wouldn't be until 1979 in Star Trek The Motion Picture that the Klingons would get a dramatic makeover. The explanation for the different look given in a future episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Like the Federation on Earth itself, the Klingon Empire included many different races. I actually don't remember that, but of course, there was eventually the episode of Enterprise where they explained the different Klingons by saying it was a result of genetic research because um, after some augments were unfrozen, you know, some augment embryos were unfrozen and aged to maturity, and then they got loose and attacked and killed some Klingons and took over a ship. They were eventually stopped, but then later the Klingons stole some augment DNA and then used it to create a serum in order to give themselves genetically augmented abilities, but instead it just made them more human. As for the prototype, John Colicos was meant to return to Star Trek. His character was written into the early drafts for The Trouble with Tribbles, A Private Little War, and Day of the Dove, but circumstances prevented him getting involved. The character of Kor was next seen in the episode Time Trap on Star Trek, the Star Trek cartoon in 1974. James Doohan would provide the voice of Kor in that episode. Kolokos as core would eventually return to Star Trek for 3 episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The Prime Directive, first mentioned in Return of the Archons, was refined here by Gene Kuhn and was the central contention of many episodes to come and remained part of Star Trek from this time forward. The Organian Peace Treaty would return as well as the catalyst and subject for future stories. John Colicos said, "It was a great episode. It was wonderful because in those days it was basically the United States and Russia in the Cold War projected into the future. The dialogue was phenomenal and we had our points of view. And what I loved at the end of the thing is that we turned into these two stupid kids bickering, and the Organian said, just hold on, you're not going to go anywhere with this war," unquote. Okay, so that'll do it for Errand of Mercy. So the next episode is going to be City on the Edge of Forever. Now, next Tuesday is Christmas Eve, so I'm not going to be streaming next week. Now, the Tuesday after that is New Year's Eve. And I'd rather not go more than more than a week without streaming. So I will probably stream on New Year's Eve, but I may do it early, like maybe at 4 instead of at 5. So that'll be City on the Edge of Forever in 2 weeks. Now, the week after that, what I'm thinking about doing is, of course, as some of you probably know, the version of Errand of, or the version of City on the Edge of Forever that was aired was actually not the original version. A lot of their episodes went through heavy rewrites, and City on the Edge of Forever was no exception. It went through extensive rewrites, and significant things were changed, which Harlan Ellison, I don't think, ever forgave them for. And the original version of City on the Edge of Forever has actually been published as a comic, and it is available online. So what I'm thinking about doing is, after I do City on the Edge of Forever, the following week, I'm going to cover that comic. I'll actually go through that comic and kind of highlight the differences between the actual episode and that version, before then moving on the week after that to Operation Annihilate, which will be the final episode of season 1. And then after that, I'll probably do a kind of season in review installment where I'll do like my favorite episodes, like a top 5 or maybe a top 10. And Scott Lee Spence says, it may not be canon, but Nichelle Nichols was playing Uhura and Lawrence Montaigne was playing Sand. Is that his name? Okay. The characters eventually marry in Star Trek of Gods and Men. Yeah, I remember that. I saw that Gods and Men thing years ago. I don't remember a whole lot. But yeah, so what that would be, 4 weeks from now, which will be like kind of like mid-January, where I'll do that kind of season review before I move on to season 2, probably. And I guess that will be it. Thank you, everyone who showed up for the stream. And thanks to those who will tune in on a rewatch. If you haven't liked the stream, please do. If you haven't subbed to the channel, please do. And maybe check out some of my other videos while you're here. And I will see you all, I guess, in a couple of weeks. And if I don't speak to you or have contact with you before then, I'll just say Merry Christmas to you all, and take care.